So, Trigger or Jufufu? Who is better for Banyue? If you were to ask me before I tested both teams, I would have said Jufufu. Faster stun, easier decibel management, and extremely low maintenance. But after testing them both in Deadly Assault and in Shiyu Defense, I'm not so sure anymore. So why Jufufu and Trigger? Well, both of them being off-field stunners, they're excellent for Banyue. But of course, if we're being real here, neither of them compare to Dialyn. But what if you're like me? You skip Dialyn to guarantee your chances for Banyue because he's just him. He's just so cool. You just have to have him. But being a free-to-play player, you have to skip a unit or two to guarantee a unit you really love. And now you have him, but you don't have Dialyn. Well, I hope this video helps people like me who got Banyue, but don't have his best insult stunner to use. Because lacking Dialyn isn't the end of the world. Jufufu and Trigger are both perfectly fine stunners for him. The question is, how do they compare to one another for Banyue? Let's get to testing and let the results speak for themselves. For all tests we're going to do, Banyue and Lucia will be using the same builds across all tests, no changes. Meanwhile, Jufufu and Trigger will be using two different sets of King of the Summit and Shockstar Disco, because Jufufu demands more attack stat than Trigger, and because Trigger's additional ability is not activated with Rupture unit, we'll be using a 2-piece Shockstar instead of a Woodpecker. Both units will be using Impact Disc 6. Both Jufufu and Trigger will be using Lighter's signature engine, Blazing Laurel, for all tests done with them. Steam Oven will work too, but I find Blazing Laurel to be the best option while having a standardized effect for both Trigger and Jufufu respectively. Its high attack stat allows Fufu to buff more crit damage, which puts it somewhat even with Trigger, who has full uptime on his crit damage buff effect for fire and ice units. And with its impact buff being tied to defensive assist, both Jufufu and Trigger will more or less have a standardized impact compared to using different engines. The assault tests will be done against Wandering Hunter using the buff Sonata. So with that out of the way, let's do our first test with Banyue-Jufufu-Lucia against Wandering Hunter.
-1.
A respectable 42,000 score for Jufufu, 4 stuns, 4 rod activations, and 4 ultimates. All in all, a cool run. Because of Jufufu's relatively fast stun speed against fire weak enemies, Banyue needs to farm rad points by doing both perfect dodges and perfect parries if you want to get consistent rad activations for each stun. In other words, rad management is relatively strict for Banyue when paired with Jufufu, especially if you're aiming for more stuns. So how does Trigger compare? Trigger does not stun as fast as Jufufu, especially on a neutral element matchup. Can she get 4 stuns on Wandering Hunter? Let's see the test with Trigger and find out.
Ether vision activated.
Too slow. Damn unyielding. Annihilate. Back in this hatred. Mountainous strength.
Run from countless legends, melodies, and dreams!
Relentless assault.
This void will reach its mark!
Annihilate. Back off. Make the earth tremble.
Adjusting for wind.
Ceaseless strike. And unyielding.
Like a shadow!
Annihilate. Back off. Mountains fall and shatter.
The name of the night, emissary!
Relentless assault. And unyielding. Tremble. Wildfire. Just like the man.
$42,000 with 3 stuns. So Trigger cannot, in fact, get 4 stuns on Wandering Hunter. But Trigger enables so much damage, both out of stun and in stun, that the lack of a fourth stun almost doesn't matter. He matches and even just slightly exceeds Jufufu's test result, who needed 4 stuns to reach that score. If there were a matchup that allows Trigger to get a 4th stun, or a matchup where Jufufu cannot get more stuns than Trigger, she would most definitely outperform Jufufu for Banyue. So that's it then. Trigger is overall better than Jufufu for Banyue? Well, not quite yet. That was only Deadly Assault tests. How do they fare in the new Shiyu Defense? As before, all the builds used are the same as the ones used in Deadly Assault tests. And because Trigger won the previous test, let's start the Shiyu Defense test with a Trigger run to start the comparison.
Ether vision
Caesar strikes! Tremble! Continue!
My turn! Light is down!
Annihilate! Blazing gale! Wildfire! In this hatred! Blazing gale! Wildfire! Mountainous strength!
Sniper's Creed. One shot, one kill.
Shake the earth!
Testing for wind. Support is here. In the name of the night emissary! Pretty, right?
Back off!
Like a shadow!
Annihilate! Make the earth tremble!
35,000 clear score with a 1 minute and 51 second clear time. A good score overall. A peculiar interaction occurred with Trigger against the boss, but we'll talk about it after Jufufu test run. Without further ado, let's see how Jufufu fares on the new Shiyu Defense. A slower clear time, but a higher score. What gives? Well, my friends, it's because of how the new Shiyu Defense score multiplier works. Because you want to front load your damage, Jufufu's faster stun speed compared to Trigger actually works in favor of the score system. Faster stun means faster opportunity to deal out the big damage, even if set damage is actually lower than Trigger's. If you notice during the Trigger run, the boss entered miHoYo phase a bit too quickly when compared to the Jufufu run. Trigger's biggest strength actually works against her in this mode. To balance her strength of enabling big out of stun damage, Trigger has a relatively slow stun speed compared to a lot of stunners. Because of this, Trigger enables so much out of stun damage from Banyue, it actually forces the boss into miHoYo phase way earlier than expected. This prevents us from getting a stun rotation while the score multiplier is still high. As a result, Trigger netted a worse score for Banyue despite enabling a faster clear time. I'm not the biggest fan of the new Shiyu Defense scoring system, but that's a topic for another video. What matters now is the test results, and the test results show that Jufufu enables a higher score for Banyue in the new Shiyu Defense. So the question of whether Jufufu or Trigger is better for Banyue isn't as clear cut as it seems at first glance. The comparison is more nuanced than we first thought, with results favoring either one depending on the mode being tackled. This kind of comparison isn't really something that a spreadsheet or tier list can quantify. Sometimes, you just have to test things yourself. So I hope that helps answer your question on which stunner is better for Banyue between Jufufu or Trigger. If you have both of them, consider diversifying your Banyue team depending on the mode. Of course, if you want the best of both worlds, high damage enabler and fast stun speed, start saving for Dialyn's rerun. I will see you all next time. Consider leaving a like and subscribing. Let me know your thoughts in the comment down below. Now go away.
Da 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 dun 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 dun. Your phone ringing. Your phone ringing. Big boy, come pick up your phone. Da 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 dun 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 dun. Why you no pick up your phone? Your phone ringing. Your phone going to go to voicemail. Goodbye.